From the primary research to the key findings, the focus on health IT, communication services, fintech, digital media and entertainment, as well as advanced manufacturing and STEM indicators. It's the 2015 State of the Industry Technology in Georgia report. Only TAG, the leading industry association dedicated to educating, promoting, influencing, and uniting the technology industry in Georgia, could provide such comprehensive information. Greetings, everyone, and welcome from the Technology Association of Georgia. It's Friday, April 17th, 2015, and this is Tech Talk. In this special edition, TAG President Tino Mantella and Dr. Keith Herndon, President of Internet Decisions, present an exclusive insider's insight into this one-of-a-kind State of the Industry report. Dynamic, real-time information on the current state of the industry, as well as results from the latest TAG Technology Decision Maker Survey primary research study. Internet Decisions President Dr. Herndon has now completed his 5th year of leading the research for TAG's industry report. In addition to an industry-leading strategic result consulting executive, he is a visiting professor at the University of Georgia, Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communications. A former reporter and editor with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Dr. Herndon became a founding executive of Cox Enterprises' Internet Division. It's a tech talk full of exclusive insight that provides an exclusive highlighted briefing every C-level technology professional and academic leader needs to know, and then takes you behind the data to just how the facts and figures became the 2015 State of the Industry report. A tech talk that both confirms and surprises as it explores all the must-know details and more. The 2015 State of the Industry Special Edition of Tech Talk, full of insights and information on Georgia's technology industry, with TAG President Tino Mantella and President of Internet Decisions, Dr. Keith Herndon. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. TAG TV and TAG Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions.
Keith, thanks for joining me on Tech Talk today.
Oh, welcome. I'm glad to be with you guys.
Well, you know, it's we've been doing this for a few years, the State of the Industry report. How many years has it been since you started Internet Decisions?
Yeah, this is my 5th year of completing the survey, and really appreciate the collaboration and partnership with TAG on this project.
Well, it's been a lot of fun today for our listeners. We're talking about TAG's State of the Industry report and some of the data that comes out of that, but it's certainly been fun and interesting data each year, and each year we seem to get more what we call our decision makers taking the survey that gives us the, at least part of the data to create the report. Over 330 leaders this year. I think that's a record, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the most that we've had that qualified. Answered the bulk of the survey questions and gave us some good quality data to pull their answers from.
And we got lots of good data, but is there one thing that you could pick out, call it a key finding, that would summarize this year's primary research?
Yes, this year's theme was about advancing Georgia's innovation economy, and the technology decision makers made it clear that they felt the 2 ingredients that drive innovation in the state of Georgia is access to skilled labor and access to capital. Those 2 concepts and what they represent came through loud and clear in the survey results.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting, and I guess to some degree not a big surprise, but if there's a surprise, it's how many people identify the same issues in respect to the opportunities and challenges we have in Georgia. So let's do a little deeper dive into both of those, starting with the labor force. What was the biggest takeaway from that area in the overall study that you found?
Well, I think we can say that job growth in the tech sector continues to be the story. Since we've been doing this data, and since 2010, really when the recession ended, we've had more than 25,000 net new jobs created in the Georgia tech sector. and that's just strong growth by any measure. But it's also important to note that these are very high-paying jobs. This year, the average annual salary for a job in the tech sector was $84,300. And it's also interesting the way the government collects the data and the way we do this BLS analysis. There really isn't a such thing as a technology sector per se, but we take the data and we roll up industries and we create one for our comparative purposes. And when we look at that, we can say that technology in Georgia is the highest paying sector. The only thing that comes close is the utilities sector, but that was only around $80,000 a year. So we can look at this data and say that we have a lot of job growth and that we have high-paying job growth.
And it looks like the colleges, from what I've seen, and not all this is in the study, but the colleges and the tech schools, universities, and the businesses are starting to coalesce around this need for talent. Are we still seeing in the report how, in some cases, challenging it is to fill some of these talent jobs?
Yeah, I think we're beginning to see that there is a need for some specific skills, things that are emerging out of the data that we might not have seen a few years ago. And for example, one of the things that clearly came out of the research this year is the rise in big data projects or business intelligence projects using big data, for example. And when people talked about skills that they needed in the workforce, they need people who are adept at using these kind of tools. You know, one specifically was Hadoop, for example. But when you think about, you know, matching up, you know, job skills with the type of projects and initiatives that are underway, we see things like mobility is still very important. But big data and business intelligence projects around big data were driving a lot of the issues in terms of where people needed their workforce to be skilled.
Yeah, I found it interesting that because for the last 4 years, mobility has been the number one issue on our decision makers' mind, and this year, for the first time in that period, it shifted to big data being number one and mobility being number two. And, you know, so that is a shift in terms of people talking about business intelligence and how to get information, and a lot of companies are springing up around that whole area. So, you know, we have some momentum, 25,000 new jobs since the recessionary period. Anything else that you'd point out in terms of needed to keep that momentum going?
Well, I think that we talked about some specific skills that were needed there in, you know, business intelligence type projects. But overall, I would say that the idea around general education, what we can do in K through 12 and what we can do in higher education, simply has to be a priority for the state of Georgia. The data points that out. We looked at a lot of different research, stuff that we conducted on our own, and then other studies that were out there in the marketplace. And one that we came across from Georgetown University really tells us the challenge that we face. This particular study found that by 2020, Georgia's STEM workforce, and for those in our audience that doesn't understand STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and math. That workforce is going to require 85,000 workers with bachelor's degrees and 44,000 workers with master's degrees. So I think anyone in K through 12 education and higher education can understand what a challenge it's going to be to recruit and train this next generation of workers in the tech sector. But it's absolutely imperative if we are to keep our economy moving along.
And those numbers you referenced are just for Georgia.
Yes, those were just for Georgia. Those were STEM workers in the state of Georgia needing 85,000 bachelor's degrees and 44,000 master's degrees. And that's to keep pace. That's not really building in significant growth in that.
And then going hand in hand with that, we talked about earlier just briefly capital. And that was another piece, whether even it's a young company. It seems like all the decision makers seem to understand that, whether they maybe are in the direct need for capital or understanding what's happening in the market. So what can you tell us about the state's raising of capital?
Well, there's some good news and some bad news when you look at the data around capital. I would say first the good news is that we have some momentum coming out of 2014. There were 60 deals that attracted $495.9 million last year, and that's the most venture capital that we've seen in the state in over a decade. We've also had some really positive results out of our angel community. There's a lot of new activities around incubators and startup accelerators and people looking at helping the early startup ecosystem in the state. So I think those are some positive news. The bad news, however, was that the amount of venture capital in Georgia did not keep pace with the overall venture capital growth that we saw nationally. Nationally, it was the best year for venture capital since the bubble year of 2000. But unfortunately, in Georgia, our share of the total market slipped back a bit and represented just 1% of the total market that the Price Waterhouse Coopers Money Tree Report tracks. So, I think this is an area that we have some momentum in, but we can certainly do better in terms of looking at the type of venture capital that we need to support some of our venture-based companies.
We just finished the legislative session, so it was good to see, speaking of momentum, that both the Angel Investor Tax Credit, which was renewed, and then the Invest Georgia, which is the $100 million investment fund over 5 years projection for early-stage and growth-stage companies, was approved. Another amount of money was approved for the latter one there. But the governor will have to sign both. We anticipate he will. But those elements help, along with Venture Atlanta and other activities that are going on, to call attention to our companies and drive more money to Georgia. I know California, I think you might have mentioned where the money's going, but 55%, I think, of the total.
Yes, certainly. California's had well over 50% of the venture market for the last decade or so, and that trend hasn't really changed much.
So we'll continue to work, Keith, on solving that problem. So I've got time for one more question. And so,
Sure.
You have a body of work here. I mean, we're on our TAG, StateOfTheIndustryReport.com site, which hopefully people will go to and explore. We always get lots of people in that, along with our executive summary. But there's lots of good information. Is there a particular finding that stands out for you this year?
Well, I think there were really two findings that were pretty interesting. We've documented for some time the importance of sectors such as health IT and fintech and communication services. But this year, when we started looking at employment, we took a deeper look at some emerging sectors, and we found some significant statistics, I think, in terms of overall tech employment. And one of those is that the real lift we're getting from advanced manufacturing. For example, there's 13,400 technology jobs, which is more than 10% of the advanced manufacturing workforce. We're also seeing some really emerging strength coming out of digital media and entertainment. We saw that sector smaller by comparison to, say, advanced manufacturing, but still some really significant technology job growth there, about 2,600. So you can see that our technology economy is expanding beyond the standards that we've had. It is part of where Georgia leads for a long time. We're beginning to see some real growth in these other areas. And then the second real interesting finding for us came from the work we did with the Innovation Index. We used this tool from the Commerce Department and found that when you go through each of the Georgia counties, we had 5 counties that surpassed the national average in terms of its innovation ranking, and this was Forsyth, Gwinnett, Fulton, Oconee, and Cherokee. And I think this illustrates that Georgia has a real core, some real core areas that foster innovation when you look at it from an index, kind of a total score. And I think as a state, we can use that to build on that and expand an innovation economy more broadly going forward.
Well, Keith, thanks for joining me on Tech Talk today. For those listening in, if you have an interest in having myself and or Keith come out to address an audience on the state of the industry, we're happy to do that. Typically we do about 20 a year. So we're always looking forward to doing that and spreading the word about the good and also the challenges that are happening in Georgia. Keith, we'll continue to work together, and thanks for your help on this year's report.
It's been a pleasure, and as you said, we're happy to come and talk about this data. I love the work that we do together. This has been a very interesting project, and I think that we keep finding new things to talk about in terms of what's happening in the Georgia technology sector, and it's good to talk about it. And we'd be glad to do that. Anyone that wants to hear about the data.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me today.